breaking news.
Hello and welcome to our viewers in the US and all around the world. I'm Michael Holmes.
And I'm Lynda Kinkade. Welcome. It is midnight on the US East Coast and 5 a.m. in London. Now, as we start this hour with breaking news in the US, the Justice Department is appealing to a federal judge's decision suspending President Trump's travel ban order.
Now, this move coming as many airlines have begun to allow people from those 7 blocked Muslim-majority countries and refugees with valid visas to go to the US. Meanwhile, protests against the president's policies broke out in several cities.
This was the scene near Palm Beach, Florida, where he attended an event at his Mar-a-Lago estate. Mr. Trump told reporters there his Justice Department would win its appeal. CNN's Jessica Schneider is in Palm Beach, Florida, and has the latest on today's demonstrations there.
Out here at Mar-a-Lago, a day of legal wranglings, a Twitter tirade by President Donald Trump, and also protesters. Take a look at some of the remnants out here. At one point, several hundred people making their march as close as they could get to Mar-a-Lago. A mostly peaceful protest, but very similar to the ones that we've been seeing over the past 2 weeks and the past 3 weekends. These people wanting to get their message directly to the president, or as close as they could get now that he's down here at what they're calling the Winter White House. As far as President Trump goes, he took to Twitter numerous times over the day, sticking to his contention that his executive order as it pertains to that immigration ban was lawful, was constitutional, and even slamming the federal judge out in Seattle several times. In fact, Donald Trump taking to Twitter, I'll read you a few of his posts, saying the judge opens up our country to potential terrorists and others that do not have our best interest at heart. Bad people are very happy. And earlier in the day, President Trump tweeting out this: the opinion of this so-called judge, which essentially takes law enforcement away from our country, is ridiculous and will be overturned. So in that case, the president calling a federal judge, a so-called judge, calling the ruling ridiculous. Of course, this is fairly unprecedented for a sitting president to criticize a federal judge. We did see Donald Trump do that when he was candidate Trump during the election, when he blasted Judge Curiel, who was presiding over his Trump University case. But now the Department of Justice has made its move, has filed that notice of appeal, and does plan to appeal to the Ninth Circuit, trying to keep in place President Trump's executive order, which has created a lot of chaos and confusion over the past week plus. Jessica Schneider, CNN, Palm Beach, Florida.
Chaos and confusion. Well, Alan Dershowitz is a professor emeritus at Harvard Law School, joining us via Skype from Miami Beach in Florida. Always good to see you, sir, and get your expertise on this. How do you think this case will be argued, this appeal, and how likely success for the Trump administration?
Well, there are 29 judges on the Ninth Circuit, and 3 of them get selected to hear a case, and so we're playing judicial roulette. The court has some of the most liberal and some of the most conservative judges, and it depends on who's drawn in the wheel. The argument the government will make will be that these states don't have standing to object to the president's executive order, that the president's executive order is constitutional, and the president has authorized to make the kinds of judgment he made, and it's impossible to predict what the outcome will be. My own judgment is that part of the president's executive order is constitutional, part of it is unconstitutional. What's required is a calibrated, nuanced approach to it. So far, none of the courts have given it that kind of approach. The court in Massachusetts said the whole statute's constitutional. The court in Washington said the statute, or that is the regulation, is unconstitutional. And we're not clear what the end result is going to be. No one can predict its outcome.
Now, Alan, Donald Trump has attacked the judge who made this decision. He took to Twitter and the president wrote, "The judge opens up our country to terrorists." What did you make of this sort of attack from the commander-in-chief of the judicial system?
Well, first of all, anybody's free to criticize judges. I've criticized judges. I wrote a whole book called Supreme Injustice, criticizing the Supreme Court for Bush versus Gore. It's the nature of the criticism. President Trump used words that seem very injudicious, very likely to alienate some of the appellate judges who might sit on this. But these judges will decide the case on their merits, and it's a closely divided case that reasonable people can disagree about. I think in the end, the stay will be at least partly lifted because parts of the executive order are constitutional. I'll give you an example. If you have a family of people in Yemen who have never been to the United States, have no connection, and they just want to have a visa, and they're turned down, they have no standing. They would have no right to challenge that. On the other hand, if somebody was in the country attending university and their visa was revoked, they would have the opportunity to challenge that. So the regulation is partly constitutional, partly unconstitutional, and the courts have to give it careful, thoughtful consideration.
I'm curious though, so there's this appeal to that judge's decision. How does it work? Can there be another appeal to whatever decision comes out of the Ninth Circuit? Could it end up at the Supreme Court, where you could end up with a 4-4 tie?
It's very likely to end up in the Supreme Court, and it's very possible it will be a 4-4 tie. That's what happened last time when President Obama's immigration order was challenged. It turned out to be 4-4, and that means that the lower court decision is affirmed. But here we have a complexity because you have a judge in the federal court in Massachusetts who ruled in favor of Trump, and that might be appealed by the plaintiffs, and the cases may come to the Supreme Court at the same time. And what happens if you have two 4-4 decisions, one of which affirms upholding the regulation and one of which affirms striking down the regulation is unconstitutional? This is a mess. The president can cure it if he withdraws the executive order and goes back to the drawing board and tries to draft it again, this time with the help of lawyers, experts, national security people. And I think we could get a decent executive order that protects us against terrorism, but doesn't raise the kind of constitutional issues that this order does raise.
US presidents, of course, do have broad and sweeping power. Is it rare for a district judge to make this sort of a ruling, a nationwide ruling on an executive action?
Well, it's rare, but it's not unprecedented. It happened exactly that way when a Texas federal court struck down President Obama's broad executive order regulating what happens to people who are in the country illegally and haven't committed crimes. We had similar decisions going to healthcare. So it's not routine, but it has happened from time to time over our history. What's odd is for a stay to be granted so quickly based on so superficial an opinion. The judge's opinion in this case from Washington is extremely superficial. It doesn't really go into the merits of the constitutional issues very well. He made a statement from the bench saying that this doesn't protect us at all. That's not the job of the judge. The judge isn't an expert in national security. The national security advisors are. So I think we're seeing overbroad generalizations both from the president and from the judge. This is not the finest hour of American legal history from any point of view.
And you know, when you look at it, I mean, you've been doing this for decades. Are you concerned about the speed with which a lot of these orders are coming out? That perhaps time has not been given, due consideration has not been given, and we're just going to end up in this legal minefield over a whole variety of issues.
I completely agree. This was done too hastily. It was done without consultation. It was done to satisfy a campaign promise rather than to protect the nation in a reasonable way. It could have been done more carefully, and it still can be done more carefully. And one hopes that perhaps the president will be advised and maybe will have second thoughts and decide to go back to the drawing board. We do need protection against terrorism, and there is the possibility of terrorists coming through our visa programs, but we can deal with that problem without confronting problems under the Equal Protection Clause, the First Amendment relating to religion, and statutes. There's a statute on the books that says visas shall not be denied based on religion. So this can be done much, much more carefully in a calibrated and nuanced way, and it can become a win-win. Right now, it's a lose-lose. Right now, we're not getting protection against terrorism. The airports are a mess. Nobody knows what the outcome is going to be. The courts are divided. The president acted too hastily. This is not a good thing for Americans or for peace or for the protection against terrorism or for the Constitution.
A lot of problems there. Alan Dershowitz, great to have your perspective on all of that. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.